Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. We've been over the last few months kind of getting quite a bit of feedback from our designers that are working through the model plan process, as well as kind of people from the community as well who are working through this. We had, coming out of the design competition, we had thought it'd be a really good idea to do an info session, present some of the stuff that we've heard from you, but also bring in some of our people from the building side who are experts on this and can kind of answer questions. So the format that we have here, and Jessica will go into detail on this, is really to go through, kind of present some of the stuff that we've learned so far, and what we've heard from you, and then open it up for a question and answer. So if you have specific questions related to any of the things related to submitting your model plans, and getting them approved, that we can hopefully work through those with you. So with that, by the way, sorry, I'm Dan Bursick. I'm the section manager for code development, City of Tucson. We have a handful of other staff here. We have Jessica Janisek, who's been working with us on the Casita project as well. We have Clayton Trevelyan and Juan Garcia, who are both of our building officials. And we also have several other staff members who work in building review. And Ina Ronquillo, who's our PIO, who has been immensely helpful in getting information out on our Casitas in Tucson website and making updates and helping to get that information out to the right people. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Jessica, and she's going to kind of start off with a presentation of what we've learned so far, and then we're going to kick it off and kind of have that conversation, a quick Q&A. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry, but I have to be able to share my screen. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. So, thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate your interest in submitting model plans and being part of our Casita model plan library. So real fast, right? This is for people who are interested in submitting designs into the library, not necessarily for homeowners that want to use plans. So we're going to be going over like the construction documents and all of those sort of things. And so I just want to make sure that you're here for the right reason, for those who are, again, wanting to actually submit designs into our model plan library. So we're going to go over what our model plan library is, give a very brief overview of using our Tucson Development Center system, requirements for a model plan submission. So we'll go through each area of the construction documents, address some of the questions we've heard so far, and then have time for additional questions. And then after we've gone through each of the elements, we'll open it up again for questions for whatever has not been addressed. And then we'll get into what is a requirement to actually submit then into the model plan library. So first, right, so the Casita Model Plan Library is a page on the Casitas in Tucson website, and it is a repository of pre-approved Casita plans. These plans will have been reviewed and approved by the City of Tucson's Planning and Development Services Department's building team. These plans may be purchased from a designer and used to build a new Casita in Tucson. Homeowners will be able to peruse the library and contact the designer of the Casita model plan they're interested in purchasing. The City of Tucson will have a model plan, will have the model plan construction documents on file so that when the homeowner submits their plot plan, the time and money to review the building designs will not apply. So again, these model plans are pre-approved, but they will still require that plot plan or site plan to obtain a building permit, and all site-specific standards and zoning regulations do still apply. Also, we'll also post this slideshow as well as a recording, sorry, just to clarify, on our Casitas in Tucson website, so that, right, we do have some links and whatnot throughout the presentation that may be useful of like examples and things like that. So our fees for our homeowners. So the fee to license is the one that is determined and charged by the designer or design firm who owns the building design. So this is the fee that they paid you to use the plan. This is a private agreement, and the amount of that fee is up to the firm. The city does not collect this. We will list the cost to license the plan for informational purposes as part of the model plan library, listing along with the contact information to contact you directly. Permitting and fees. So when a homeowner uses a model plan on file, they do not need to pay the building review fee. However, there is a $55 administrative fee to use a model plan, which includes the first review of the plot plan. Homeowners will need to submit a plot plan and pay the associated permit costs to obtain the permit, along with impact fees for new buildings. If plot plans need to be reviewed more than once, this process does incur additional costs. And the plan review and permit fee for a building portion is based on the valuation of the project. There may be additional fees to upgrade the water meter, and this is site specific based on the existing conditions, which include the existing water meter size, current water usage, and the number of additional fixtures. So we have an example there, one of our plot plan examples that we do have on our website to support. So this intellectual property, right? Designers and firms will enter into agreements with homeowners directly. And so you will still retain your intellectual property. When a homeowner submits a plot or site plan, they will also need to include a document that indicates that the designer or firm has granted them permission to use the model plan that we have on file. So we have an example here from the urban infill project, right? So it's very simple, where you have the property owner, the permit application number, the parcel number, property address, model plan identifier, and then signatures. So that is what needs to be submitted by the homeowner or whomever is using your plan to ensure that give permission to use the documents we have on file. It's also advised that you have documents that protect your intellectual property for clients and homeowners to sign. So using our TDC system, so we have a Tucson Development Center online that you'll need to make an account to use to submit your model plan documents. When you do so, you will go ahead and you'll select this new residential model plan. And then we have a guide that you can use to kind of help process through using the system if it's new to you, and which we will drop into the chat for you, as well as have on our website. You can find it currently on the PDSD website, but just we'll also include it on our Casitas and Tucson website. So for design options, right? Some of you guys have designs that can go from like a studio to a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom. So it is suggested that you submit each of them separately, right? So submit a studio model plan and then a 1-bedroom model plan. By doing so, the homeowner is buying access to use the one plan with the options that they want to build. This can help to keep permit costs down and streamline the process for the plot review. If necessary, the design firm can provide additional drawing options to the homeowner as revisions to the site-specific permit. Providing new drawings in addition to the plot plan will incur additional plan review fees above the initial $55 administrative fee. 2 exterior elevation options are acceptable as long as the footprint layout of the building does not change. So now we're going to get into the requirements for a model plan submission and thinking about our construction documents. So full construction documents, everything needs to be in accordance with the 2018 International Residential Code, our local amendments, and City of Tucson adopted design ordinances. Casita plans are not required to be prepared by a registered design professional unless there are any structural elements that exceed 20 feet in length. And we will also be providing some additional materials and supports to guide you through this. So the submission format, so how the documents need to be formatted when you submit them into the TDC. All documents shall be in a PDF format with graphic scale, rotated so pages read upright. Verify that you've unlocked and flattened all the drawing and reports. Sheet title block sizes and locations shall remain constant on each page of the plan set. Reserve the same location, a minimum size of 3 by 5, on all plans for city stamps. And files should be saved in black and white. Light colors may be difficult to see after it's switched into grayscale. And documents and reports must be submitted as separate PDF for each document type. So for example, your plans, your calculations, specifications, etc. And now we'll get into what each of those are. So your model plans must include the following drawings. You need to have a floor plan, right? So a scaled layout from top down of the building layout. Floor plans must include lines for both sides of each wall and identify the dimensions of every wall opening. A foundation plan. This specifies the width and depth of all footings, location and size of reinforcement and anchor bolts, location and type of all structural hold downs and foundational dimensions. A roof plan. This must include the size, spacing, and span of all rafters, joists, beams, and other structural elements. Indicate how the design meets the cool roof, such as having a white finish as well. You'll have exterior elevations, and you'll have building and wall sections. These are an X-ray view of the wall construction, so not to be confused with the elevation. These include the fasteners, the mechanical connections, such as hold downs and hurricane clips, water, moisture resistance, and load-bearing details. So these are kind of an overview of all of the sort of drawings that you must include. And we've heard several questions thus far. And so there's a lot of text on here because we just included all of the response, right? So the first one is around the building development codes that model casitas need to abide by, right? So they do, as I said earlier, all new residential buildings in Tucson need to be in alignment with the 2018 International Residential Code, local amendments, and City of Tucson adopted design ordinances. The Inclusive Home Design Ordinance is a visitability code that provides guidance for all newly built dwellings in the City of Tucson for minimum accessibility criteria such as lever type, door hardware, and zero-step building entry. And the installation of solar panels is not required, but must be prepared for in the future if not included. So this means reserving roof space and electrical service capacity for future panel installation. So you can review the solar readiness ordinance for specifics on how to meet the solar readiness requirements. And again, for model plan design purposes, the electrical should be designed as if the casita has its own electrical service. This will facilitate the plan review process and can be revised when a site plan is submitted to reflect using the existing electrical service of the primary residence as necessary. All right, so for those of you who may not know that, right, a casita can use the same electrical service, but it need not have to. The second is a separate drawing that shows an egress plan required, or does an egress plan need to be annotated in a particular way? So a separate egress plan is not required for ADU plans. However, every casita must include at least one exterior swinging door that's 36 inches wide and include emergency escape and rescue openings that are required for all sleeping rooms. And then are structural calculations required to be sealed by a registered design professional for a casita model plan? No, unless an engineer is required if a casita design includes a beam of more than 20 feet, any freestanding walls greater than 7 feet in height, and any retaining walls retaining 3 feet of earth or more. And lastly, of our architectural questions is, can a design using prefabricated building materials be a casita model plan? Yes, but these designs are reviewed and approved by the state of Arizona, not the city of Tucson. So designs that have received an Arizona certification for a modular building can be included in the casita model plan library. And now, right, we would like to open it up for you if you have any other additional architectural questions, whether by dropping in the chat or unmuting yourself and asking them directly to our building staff. If we are unable to answer any questions today, we'll take note and report back out.
Hi, good morning. This is Annalisa. I'm one of the designers for Casita Sama project. And I have just some questions on clients who have reached out for the particular design, but then having questions on potential modifications within the existing design. For instance, if they wanted to do, we have indicated in the competition like a plasterboard soffit, but they want exposed joist or so like structurally, like the details of that within the parapet detail might be slightly different. How we would like to like deal with like the joist hangers to be concealed or not concealed. And similarly in our foundation details, if there is a concrete stem wall or if the block work or the IFC block goes down to the foundation. I'm just curious how you guys would prefer for that to be indicated or not, and if it's a change that just happens with the client on site when they make these modifications, how would that influence like inspections throughout construction process for them, or us needing to get involved for as-builts? And maybe like also similarly is a question of like if they wanted to change the size of a window or remove it completely or introduce another small one anywhere else.
Hi, this is Juan Garcia. So changes like that can be indicated on the actual model plan as options. So you can indicate those options. The real distinction is going to be when there's a structural difference between one model versus another. But if a model has various options, those can be indicated. And then with the site plan, once we get to the inspection phase, we'll be aware of what those modifications could be. Like if you have a detail for two sizes of windows in one wall, we'll know that either of those two windows, can be placed in that area.
Yeah. So when we do our submission now, we won't necessarily know, like for instance, a future client like window change desire. So once say we have submitted something with not an option, because we will submit our ideal design, but then the client chooses to omit or introduce a window that's not indicated as an option, how would that process look?
Okay, understood. So that would be a revision to the site build permit that's been pulled from the model. So the model template will be your ideal version, and that's set in stone. That'll indicate if there are any options available. However, if the person building the model on their actual build permit, if they're going to make a modification like that, then that will have to be a revision to that specific permit. And with that, that'll include whatever that change is, and any kind of structural modifications will have to be notated.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Alejandro, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, good morning. I have my design was a prefabricated solution. So what I just saw while you were doing the presentation is that for this case, we will need to work through the state of Arizona. So if my understanding is the correct, I should go first to Phoenix, speak with the authorities over there, because this will be through the IBC. And then I'll come back to the Tucson authorities, and then I will be working with the ICC codes. That's correct. And secondly, is there any option or way that maybe you can assist or support us? Because when I was with the authorities in Phoenix, they told me that they will last this at least 6 to 12 months, the review. So this means like a year just with the state, and then come back to Tucson. What do you think about that?
Okay, so forgive me, just to recap. So your question is, so if going through the state becomes a 6-month to a 1-year process, and you're asking if there's a way the city can facilitate that process?
Yes.
Okay, unfortunately not, because the prefabricated structure would be considered a factory built building. It actually has to go through the state of Arizona for licensing. And, upon its readiness, it'll receive a series of stickers, for lack of a better word, that indicates it's ready for placement. At that point, then we'll verify the site conditions and where it's being placed. But ultimately, those types of structures start with the state.
Okay.
Thank you. Shreya?
Hi, yes, I'm not sure if this question is, well, I do have one architectural, and that's just about, again, going back to building in variation. I have a few plans that I've reused. I haven't made them model plans yet. For one, I don't understand the fee structure, and I think that's huge for, uh, for, so that was one thing I wanted to get clarified. And then the second, even with these revisions, like how is the fees, how are you getting assessed for these fees during that process? And then again, with building in, I think for any of us as designers, I mean, a lot of architects don't use model plans for this very reason. Like there's just, it's hard to make this type of drawing a flexible document, right? So how do you, like, how do you, at what point is it considered a fully new plan? It sounds like the dimensions, right? The overall dimensions of the building need to stay the same. But beyond that, anything else will be considered a revision as far as any changes, like you might have options for the interior wall layout, right? You might have options for, can you have options for wall types, different types of wall systems? Again, like how much variation can be built in? And then how does that affect the fee structure, whether it's being reviewed again, when you resubmit as a revision, are you getting charged at that point?
No, thank you for the questions. So yes, you're correct. So the model plan process is to basically approve a standard model of something that's not going to be varied from. There may be, a couple of options, including a bay window here, maybe an option, or an additional window or door in this area, items like that. But the overall structure is still typical of the build. If modifications to that structure are going to be made and we're going to ask for a revision to the build permit, if you will, not the template, yes, that becomes a separate review process, because now we're looking at a custom structure. It's not based on what was approved during the model process or the model review. How the fee structure is done, the model plan is the fees are based on the square footage. The review fee is based on the square footage and the valuation tables. Once we get out of the model and it's approved, each of the individuals is based on the square footage and the valuation tables for the permitting fees. However, there is no review fee associated with the build permit. If we're making a modification or a revision to the build permit to customize something, then those fees will be, we don't typically see this, so we need to verify with our fee schedule, but those would be hourly fees associated with those modifications. And mind you, once we make a modification to that build permit, we are going to ask for the complete drawing so we can verify that whatever that modification is fits and works with the original design. So essentially, it does become a custom build.
Okay, but typically outside of this process, I mean, we would have to pay for these model plans, right? I mean, how much are those fees initially?
As a submittal, it's going to be whatever the review fee works out to, based on, again, on the square footage, the construction type, and what that calculates to. We can provide a couple of examples based on various sizes. Not right now, but we can certainly follow up with a couple of examples if that would help.
Peter, I see that you are also asking some questions in the chat. Did you have additional questions you would like to ask?
Well, I just wanted to raise this question. It's a process question. It's much less of an actual architect design, but it would affect those designs. And I wanted to make sure that it's in front of everyone. I appreciate Dan's response. I understand sort of where the city's coming from, but it's the issue is that, you know, the city wants to say these are private contracts, but then come in and potentially at least kind of undermine those CCNRs. You know, the neighborhood associations, and I assume this is true for HOAs as well, you know, our job in effect is to protect those, to have everyone kind of live by that private agreement, right? So the problem is that with an ADU that comes in, for example, we're in a neighborhood where there's a single story requirement. You can't build a second story. But we've got ADUs coming in, or advice from the city coming in, that says, hey, even if you have a one story, you could go up to 25 feet on your new ADU. Well, that's not a one story. So where in the process does a neighborhood association or perhaps an HOA get involved so that the city doesn't, in effect, bypass the neighborhood association and, in effect, undermine those CCNRs and end up with, you know, I mean, what's the choice? A legal battle to you know, that's no good for anybody. I'm just suggesting that perhaps the process ought to include a stage there where there's some engagement in a way that doesn't complicate this understanding legally between there being a private agreement that the city doesn't want to get involved in trying to police, and then the city's public role in permitting. I understand the tension between those. I'm suggesting that there ought to be a way to work through that so that we don't end up with a functional mess. I think that's a technical term, mess. Anyway, and Dan, I do appreciate kind of your responses and whatnot. I just want to raise this, given the architects and designers on the line, so that they're sensitized to this as well.
No, thank you, Peter, for the comment. One thing I do want to just point out, and you saw my responses, and we can work on an official kind of response from our city attorney. But
Sure.
one thing that I do want to point out is just the fact that the code, when it did go through, you're only allowed to build a detached ADU that's the same height as the existing homes. So in your, let's say your CCNRs that you have there, and it restricts it to a single story, you wouldn't be able to have a 2-story ADU because it has to match the existing height of the buildings that are there. So you wouldn't specifically have an issue. I just wanted to point that out.
That's how I read it as well. But I have a resident who got guidance from the city that is inconsistent with what you just said, and said that, oh, they can, if it's attached, it can go up to 25 feet. And to me, that's kind of trying to game the system. And there's some inconsistency, again, between what you just said, which agrees with my read, and what the information a resident was provided, the guidance. And so, again, just flagging that for you. We can follow up offline, but I do want to just flag that for you. That's the type of tension that I'm talking about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you.
Jonathan, question for our building?
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think what I've sort of taken away from the conversation so far is that we can put in different options, you know, for different features or aspects of the plan that we can imagine that people might like, or that might help adapt the plan to this different site conditions. So that's helpful to know. And also, I think would be sort of maybe useful advice to actually offer the designers, like thinking about how, moving a site, moving a structure around on a site might, for example, change an egress, the egress pathway or orientation of an egress window. So that might be something that would be good to anticipate and actually plan for at this stage. So it might be helpful to really think through, and maybe with a smaller group of us, like brainstorm a list of those kinds of conditions that we would want to reasonably anticipate and put in as options, so that we're not pushing people into a situation where they think that they're going to get something for a really low cost, and then all of a sudden they're having to talk to an architect and pay an architect's fee. One of the other things that I think would be really helpful on the city side, and I'm mindful of a conversation I had just 2 days ago with somebody who has been trying to build an ADU, and is like, one of the types of people that I think we really want to encourage to build an ADU. She's a working mom, a single parent, working mom. The income would really help her out, but would also allow her to provide some additional stability to people in her extended network. So, it would be a really good thing for her, for the city, in order to build an ADU. And she is just absolutely perplexed trying to figure out how to get it permitted legally, how much it's going to cost her, not just the building part of it, but the permit part. And I can kind of pick my way through based on the information that's been presented so far, like what it might cost. But I think that the more you can encourage us to nail this down so that people will not need to make changes that involve an architect, a trip back to an architect, the more controlled those costs will be, and the better the sort of customer experience side will be. The other thing I would strongly encourage the city to do, if you can, sort of package the fees, right? So right now there's a big range, and it takes a lot of sort of attention, time, and brain power to figure out what the fees are going to be just at a minimum level and what they might be at the upper end. So there's really not that much range here. We're talking about structures that are relatively small in size. Can you just fix the fee so that so that people know how much it's going to cost if they don't make any changes to get the permit, so that you sort of lock that down? The other part of that would be, can you start to look at some of these other fees? Your water meter sizing, at least in my understanding, is based on 1950s toilet flow rates, and we can't legally install those anymore. So maybe that doesn't actually need to change. That's another sort of surprise, multi-$1,000 cost that it gets sprung on people. And at some point, people just throw their hands up and say, I'm either not going to do this or I'm going to do it without a permit. And this, I think, is an opportunity to really reset that expectation and that level of interaction with the city. So if you can start to package some of this, first by giving us some really firm guidelines, not just about what we need to do to get the plans approved to your standards, but how we anticipate those potential changes so that people don't need to come back and pay for architectural expense or architectural services, which are expensive. There's just no way around it. So if you can boil it down so there's no changes, right? Like, or as few changes as possible, that people come in and they know, all right, my permit's going to cost $1,500. I don't need to change, if I have to change the water meter, it's going to be another $2,000, and that's it, right? Those are the dimensions. But give them really clear rules about when, what lane they need to stay into to keep those costs down. I think that's more important than anything else here. If this is actually going to serve its purpose of encouraging people to build ADUs.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really important. We appreciate all of that feedback. I'm writing down all of these things. Eric?
Hi. Could you briefly talk about plans that have like a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom options? Did you say earlier that you need those to be separate model plans? So we were working on a model plan that has a studio version, a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom. It's all essentially the same plan with the bedrooms added on. Are you saying that they need to be separate submittals?
I think that would be the preference, because it separates the three options. So it makes it again, going back to the fee discussion we just had, that would make it a little easier to identify a single cost with exactly what a person would be getting. And also from the model plan review, it would make it easier because we're looking at one single structure versus one with structural changes and modifications.
Thank you. Angelisa?
Hi, thank you. Yes, I want to just say that I totally agree with what Jonathan was mentioning. I think the question that comes up a lot, especially also because our design has these variations within them, is the clients are wanting to really understand the cost that they would be dealing with, and depending on which choice they go with. So I think a package deal at that point, say if they select the 1 bedroom or the studio or the 2 bedroom, like once they select that, that there's almost like a link or a summary for them to understand this is going to be the designer's fee, this is going to be the city's fee, etc. And they understand a total number from their selection. I think that would be wonderful. And then I just want to really dumb down the question that was mentioned by Soraya about the options. So if we have a design, say like for example, in wall types, that's currently for an IFC block system. If the client then decides to build it themselves using just a concrete block and fur out, that would be then a variation, like structurally, that then incurs like a revision on their end if we didn't include those types of walls like within the design package. Is that correct? So if we want to avoid the client needing to go back to the city and pay additional fees, we would almost have to anticipate a few versions of what could be like selected from a client to help them not have to do this circle back to you guys for another approval.
Yeah, the short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Shariah?
Yeah, so yeah, adding on to this options and variations. Okay, so some of our plans weren't selected. Mine wasn't selected. So in this case, I will have to pay all these fees, right? For every variation. That's why I'm not sure the separate submittal makes sense to me. I want to be like right at that point when I'm submitting a plan, and I've heard so far is like up to $2,000 to submit a model plan with the city. Am I now going to be charged like $6,000 for showing, even though it's the same footprint, right? Like I have a 20 by 20 plan, I have a 20 by 22 plan, like, and I haven't been doing this process because everybody changes the plans. Like that's just human nature. People want to put their own whatever stamp, their flavor on the project. So how do I now as a designer, right, like accommodate this without how do I, like, outside of, if my project is not being subsidized, then I have to now pay for each variation? Like, how does this work? That's really my biggest question, because at a certain point it doesn't become cost effective. There is no cost savings.
So the cost savings comes in once the model plan is approved. Then what you're doing is you're saving the review fees on the associated reviews. So once you have the model plan and you apply for a build permit that's actually going to be built, there are no review fees attached to that, because all of the building review was completed in the model. To your point about having multiple options or variations, so if the footprint of your structure is identical in each of your 3 versions, and the changes or the alterations are non-structural, that's something that can be accomplished on one permit. Again, an example is adding a bay window to a structure, or having one version with a bay window and one version without. I think that's the easiest kind of example I can provide you. Those can be captured on the same model plan. something like that.
But
If you're looking at like a one bedroom.
but another common one is construction type, right? The wall type. So like sometimes we try to do something a little nicer, you know, I don't know, something more custom, yeah, like maybe masonry or a wood frame structure, heavy timber structure. But not everyone can afford that, right? So then I always have to have an option that is just conventional construction. So it's kind of a structural change, but I feel like as long as the footprint's the same, you should be able to build that into the plan set, right?
Oh, so with the varying wall structures, there's also, you know, actually maybe this would be a better conversation to have in person to talk about so we get a better idea of exactly what you're talking about. And we'd be open to that. If you're willing to set something up, we can definitely dive into that.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Juan. Valerie.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Okay, good, thank you. I thought maybe I might offer a little bit of advice to simplify the answers to all these questions. First of all, with the permit fees and the costs, the city, the way they charge customers varies a little bit, and I think it would be wonderful if they got to a package deal, but essentially what I tell my clients is that they should be prepared to spend between $3,000 and $5,000 on upfront permitting costs, and that is dependent on square footage and things like that. So it kind of prepares them, and it is general, but it's the best that we can do, and it so far has been working. We've sold 15 model plans so far, and a lot of those have basically had variations built within them, and those fees seem like nothing has gone extremely over that. So then in terms of variations, the piece of advice that I would give to you all is that this working off of model plans is a lot different than the custom design world that we're used to as architects. So it is in your best interest, in my opinion, to limit the amount of modifications that you'll allow. So when you're working with your homeowners, you have to tell them, yes, this is allowed, no, that's not. And so what I tell people, you cannot add more plumbing fixtures. You can take things away. You could change the layout of the kitchen, but you cannot change the roof shape or the envelope. And it's more difficult you can't make it bigger. We have shaved off a couple of square feet on a few instances, as long as it does not affect the structural design. So we would like cut off 2 feet and just that, you know, the roof structure stays the same. People generally, there's been a couple instances where they changed the configuration of the interior walls, and the building inspectors review that, and we have decided not to take issue. And then when you draw your drawings, you can kind of plan for the idea that somebody might make a different window or a different opening based on their site conditions. So we drew all of our windows at 6 feet wide so that we could size the headers to that extreme condition, and then they can make the openings smaller, and they can slide the openings along the wall if they want. And if we work with the homeowners more precisely at the front end, we create, when we do a site plan, we create a sheet 1 that has a site plan, and then a sheet 2 that describes those modifications. And then we submit that all at once to the zoning, and they've been approved that way. So we call them a one-time revision, and we keep them really limited. So that's been helpful. And then in terms of like variations, in terms of having, say, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, we submitted ours as one document, but we have 3 floor plan sheets, 3 framing plan sheets, 3, and they all get packaged into the same set of review documents. So as an example, the one that's on the model library right now is called the Roost. It's got a studio version, a 1 bedroom version, and a 2 bedroom version. That was all reviewed at the same time with the city, because the details and the framing and foundation, it's all exactly the same. When we sell one, we only give the clients the relevant sheets So again, I think it's in your best interest to really limit what you'll allow yourselves to get into in terms of these one-time revisions. And then last, we had one client build the buildings out of SIP panels. And so we did the zoning review, got it approved, and then we had to get shop drawings from the manufacturer and submitted those separately as a one-time revision. And yes, that was an additional fee to the client, but it was very quick. It was actually, we submitted those a few weeks into, they were already pouring the foundation, and then we submitted the shop drawings and the city turned it around in 3 days. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. And again, I put my website in the chat earlier, and I'm on the other end of the contact info. So if anybody has questions, we're really happy to help you out and answer. And then I guess I will mention while I'm talking, the liability, might come up in your minds. We've also gone through that process and created waivers for our clients. We do not do construction administration. So I would be happy again to share some of that experience with anybody who wants, if you just send me an email.
Thank you. That's really helpful and appreciative for all of your knowledge, sharing your knowledge and your resources. So thank you. So if you continue to think of other construction-based questions, we will get in now to the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But if you continue to think of anything, either dropping them in the chat or sending us a follow-up email, and we're happy to just try and answer everything as best as we can. And so with that, as I said, we're going to get into our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, right? So the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing design must be fully detailed and provided as part of the model plan submittal. Strictly speaking, the International Residential Code is prescriptive in nature and can be adhered to without a design professional. However, as these are model plans will be available to the public, it may be in the design firm's best interest to have a licensed registrant to prepare a stamp submittal. But we'll go through each of the elements, like I said, the electrical, the plumbing, and the mechanical, and then have time for questions for each element. So our first one is thinking about our electrical plans. So what needs to be included? So your electrical plan, you need to have a complete panel schedule, circuit designation, and riser diagram. And then so you can use either a one line or a riser diagram. Your panel schedule needs to, you need to include a panel schedule and prepare load calculations. There needs to be a note on the breakers set aside for the solar. So whether you're directly including it immediately or just saving space for later. And then the lighting and outdoor lighting code. So all exterior lighting must conform with the outdoor lighting code. This is currently in a process of being updated, and our most recent one is from 2012. Model plans will not include a lighting calculation, but must include the fixture type, location, lumens, and color temperature, kelvins. And things that are more likely to get the calculation approved are things such as using only fully shielded structures or covering the bottom of the bulb, only letting the light shine down, that sort of thing. So we've had a couple questions already submitted to us about our electrical. So the first being, do Casita model plans need to show assigned circuit numbers and panel names, numbers for each outlet? Yes. A complete panel schedule, circuit designation, and riser diagram are required. And then as we said, right, is a one-line diagram necessary? Either a one-line diagram or a riser diagram may be used. And then as we just said, right, the Casita model plan will be in compliance with the lighting and outdoor lighting code. Again, it is in the process of being revised, and so please refer to our 2012 outdoor lighting code, and just making sure that you're following that. And then, do model plans need to include a complete set of heating, cooling, load calculations, and do those calculations need to be sealed by a registered design professional? So all new residential dwellings are required to include heating and cooling. The mechanical load calculations used to properly size the system must be included in the initial submittal, but they do not need to be completed by a licensed professional. ResCheck is a tool from the Department of Energy that can be used to complete energy calculations, and other proprietary software can be used as well for the mechanical system design. And then again, thinking about how models demonstrate the electrical element for solar readiness. So that just needs to be noted on note the electrical capability in the electrical plan, and then the space on the panel itself. So now we will go into questions on thinking about things that are related to that electrical, if you have anything specific about that. Yeah, Valerie.
I just have a request. we show 100 amp power requirement for each unit that we have, which is great. When we push those through on our site plan, we always have to do 90% of the time we have to do a panel upgrade to the existing residence. So if somebody has a 200 amp panel, we'll have to show in our design an upgrade to 400, and then the Casita basically becomes a sub panel to that new 400 amp service. Every single time the TEP comes out and says to the builder, we don't it takes 6 to 9 months right now to get a 400 amp meter pack. So every single time so far, TEP has come out and suggested that they bring a second 200 amp service to the property. And so that is I can't get them approved through building review without the 400 amp. I don't know why, but there's no possibility so far to get it approved with 2 separate meters in the review process. And then TEP comes in and requests it, and then I have to submit a revision saying per TEP request, we've done this. So if during your review process, initially you could allow us to show the second service coming in, I think that would be more congruent with what TEP is suggesting in the field.
Great, thanks, Valerie. Yeah, we'll take a look at that and definitely and see if there's a way to address that to make it a little easier than waiting 6 to 9 months for that 400 amp meter. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, we're learning a lot. Jonathan.
I'd just like to flag that as another place where the city could really provide some much needed leadership and also cost reductions that are congruent with the climate pledge that the city has enacted. Along with the water upgrade requirements, the power requirements are really not in line with reality. And if you're looking at what a modern, sort of high efficiency code compliant building is drawing, with appliances, with contemporary heat pump appliances, you don't really need the size of service that that the code is pointing you towards. There's also a bunch of devices, load management devices that can be installed in existing panels that will, for example, switch between an electric dryer or another high current device and an EV charger so that you can sort of get more power out of an existing panel while still remaining compliant. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is another enormous expense for that can become a real roadblock for people. That's reason number one. And reason number two is that the amount of waste and excess resources that are required, it's more wire, it's bigger copper, and that's coming from just down the road in some cases, and it's just not necessary. So I think that the city could really benefit its residents and help to reduce housing costs by looking really carefully at some of these requirements for things like water and power, and proactively providing some options that allow people to do things that are a lower cost, lower environmental impact, and still perfectly safe and work really well. So there's a lot of information out there, and that would be an opportunity for us to provide some real leadership with real local impact at both within our city and within our state.
If I may, we hear you and we understand. I would like to encourage everyone that has any suggestions like this to go ahead and provide feedback to the Tucson-Pima County Joint Code Committee. They are currently meeting in preparation for adopting the 24 codes. So this would be good information to have to distribute among that committee for any kind of changes you think might be feasible and appropriate. So we'll make sure we get an email address or that link sent out.
I'm bringing it up here because because of the size and scale of these projects, this is a really nice potential way to pilot some of these ideas without tackling the entire code process, and to demonstrate that it's viable and possible, and also that it saves money. and that's always going to be a problem with these small structures. We have all of the most expensive parts of a building. You have a kitchen, a bathroom, you have a heating and cooling system, you have a water heater, you have electrical service. Like all of those things, just like that's all of the expensive stuff in a house. So if we can do things that would help keep those costs lower, it would really help, I think, drive more adoption of casitas.
Yes or no, understood. It's just as we're preparing for that 24 code cycle, it is a prime opportunity to look at those amendments that we may adopt and to make something a little more permanent than, maybe a one-off solution. It's something we can actually build looking forward. So we would appreciate any of those comments and suggestions.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, as you think of additional questions related to electrical or, you can either drop them in the chat and continue. All right, our team is continuing to address those. And we'll also hopefully have some time at the end as well. Or you can email them to us as well. So thinking about our next area, right, is our plumbing. And as was already stated, right, yes, all the most expensive parts of a house go into even these very small scales. I apologize, I lost my section there. Right, so you'll need to include a full plumbing plans, plumbing fixture plans, and then if you are using any kind of gas, natural gas, you will also have to have a gas piping plan and a gas demand calculation. Right, so your plumbing plans will be fully dimensioned plumbing plans showing riser diagrams for water, wastewater, and vent piping. And then when a site plan is submitted, it will need to indicate the current water meter will meet the increased water demand. So again, you want to try and think your plans will include water usage estimates. So again, we get lots of questions about water. And so thinking about what information needs to be included. So as we said, a model plan must include plumbing fixture unit schedule and water supply calculation to establish the minimum diameter of water supply piping from the water meter. And then when a site plan is submitted, the size and water meter and total developed length of water supply piping must be shown. So for casitas that share a water meter with its primary dwelling, all the fixtures in both buildings must be included in the water supply calculation and demand schedule when that site plan or plot plan is submitted. And so, yes, getting into it, Valerie.
I just want to take a moment. I don't know if Clayton's on here, but Clayton and I and Brad Lancaster this year worked to upgrade our gray water ordinance a little bit to make it easier to use. All of our Casita designs have gray water designed into those. It takes some educating homeowners, but I want to encourage everybody to include those and put the infrastructure in now because they're going to be useful in the future, I think. So the gray water ordinance has been slightly modified this year. And if anybody has questions on how to use it or how to design for it, please email me. I'd love to help you out with that. It's a great feature for the homeowners, I think. And we like to call our site plans high performance site planning, and we can lean on local organizations like Watershed Management Group and other landscape architects who are able to help homeowners create efficient site plans. So.
Oh, sorry, Alex. Yeah. Do you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, sorry. Are you talking about the question I put in the chat?
Yeah, I only got to the part that you didn't see like where to raise your hand, so I just figured I'd call on you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think mine's sort of a process question that involves some of the MEP and the site plan stuff that we're talking about. I guess I'm just kind of wondering if the overall goal in a way is to make this as cost effective to the homeowner as possible. And, you know, maybe not even have to engage the, i.e. not having to engage design professionals again. Are these missing pieces like the site plan and some of the MEP stuff that needs to be super site specific? Is that something like the owner can submit their site plan or their subs could submit the MEP stuff without having to engage the professionals? Or is there always going to have to be a professional like packaging up it for the specific to the site portion?
Again, if the modifications are following the prescriptive measures of the code, then they should be able to, we would accept those as a revision to the model plan, or not to the model, but to the site specific plan. We really don't see a whole lot of that, so I'm not going to tell you that, you know, we're ready to process that. But we are willing to talk about it and work out a process to accomplish that.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, just kind of going over again, we're just kind of going over all of these things pretty quickly for all of us. We'll need to include a mechanical floor plan, equipment schedules, and ventilation calculations. And again, everything should be in compliance with our current code, which is the 2018 IRC. And then our structural, yeah, Valerie, sorry, I didn't want to get too far ahead.
We did a mechanical plan that's quite basic, and then we called out for the manual calculations to be a deferred submittal. And that's because there's just so much variation in what different contractors actually install. So we found it bizarre to design for the system in our model plan. So again, we specifically say on our mechanical sheet that that the calculations and specification for the equipment are deferred. And so that puts it on the builder to lean on a licensed HVAC installer to provide those things reflective of the actual system he'll be putting in. So that makes sense. I don't know how to do mechanical calculations myself. So that's how we've approached it. And it's worked well.
Great, thank you again. Really appreciate, right, like the actual experience that you have and going through these structures and these processes. Yeah, Jonathan.
Just to underscore there, like the mechanical calculations, if they're done properly, will be different for different orientations. So unless you are going to request mechanical calculations for like, you know, 8 different potential orientations of the structure, what Valerie is suggesting probably will result in installations that are higher quality and better able to meet the comfort needs of the occupants. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of really oversized systems that won't provide good comfort and will use more energy and will not last as long because there'll be more wear and tear on the systems from starting and stopping too frequently. So I would encourage that become the sort of approach for this, is that the mechanical systems be sized by a licensed HVAC contractor, and that you require a real manual J, and that you make sure that that's actually done with the data that's provided. One sort of bridge could be, and one sort of support that you could provide is, manual J requires a bunch of inputs. Those inputs are knowable from the kinds of things that are on the plans. So it might be possible to develop a template that could be completed by the designer, explaining what the different assemblies are, what the R values are, so that information can be accurately input into the manual J and efficiently put into the manual J, so that you get good results out of that. Because otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out. But requiring a load calculation, a universal load calculation, will result in systems that are too big and don't perform well and that break. So please don't do that.
Thank you. I want to make sure I capture that note. I guess this is recorded. Okay. Yeah, so now thinking also around, right, just making sure that you have your structural elements. So some of these we've already kind of touched on, but just really wanting to make sure that, right, we want to make sure that you have foundation plans, your structural general notes, right? So thinking about showing, oh, excuse me, right, including materials, methods, and special inspection requirements, lateral bracing, floor and roof framing plans, right, to show all the layout, section, and detail references, your structural details, and then deferred submittals, such as pre-engineered roof trusses. And so at this point, right, if we have any other questions for our building team, the rest of the presentation is just thinking about what needs to then get submitted to be added into the library. So thinking about it from like the website perspective. So at this point, if you have other questions specific to any elements of the building, this is a good time while we have them all on the line with us. Yeah, Shreya.
I just had a quick question about the timeline. So when are you all wanting this all submitted by?
So I mean, we're taking submittals for our library. We don't have a specific like deadline or anything. For those who are having review fees waived for the design competition, those we're asking to be completed within the calendar year.
I guess a similar question would be, so how does it, so if we want us to be on the website, like how do we go about, do we just indicate on the like plans or what, how does that work?
Yeah, we'll get into the materials that you'll submit and that you'll submit that like to myself and Dan. Yeah, in our next little portion, we'll get into the specifics for that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. Samuel.
Yes, I had a quick question. I know right now it's kind of just in the phase of trying to gain all this to work. But is there any steps being taken as well for builders to be in the process with the architects and owners to help facilitate building these projects once they go through the permit phase, or helping them through the permit phase?
We are currently just in the process, like as you said, in building out the library. So working with you all, designers, design firms, to help get those the plans out there, and for homeowners to be able to connect with you all. And then we'll see what other steps may need to be indicated, but at this point, that's what we're working on.
Okay. And then the other question would be, is there a timeline that you guys have right now to get a couple more options in the library approved? Because I believe there's only one approved right now.
Yeah, I mean, we are just going through them as we are receiving them. Yeah, and so we're hoping that this workshop today, right, answers a lot of the major questions or hurdles. And then, as like I said, we'll go over what would need to be submitted to us as a city for being included in the library in just a few moments. And then we'll just keep building.
Okay. Yeah, and I do want to mention that we are working on an additional, as Peter said, like a basic flow chart of the process. And this is related to the building process and some additional documentation on the actual that portion as well, which we will have on our website. So we are working on that as well, and we'll have some additional information to try to help people through that process.
Yeah, thank you. Valerie.
I don't really intend to be totally promoting ourselves, but we have a sales platform where we're trying to create a library of builders that are familiar with plans. So if you're a builder that has, say, put together bids for any of the plans on our library, and then you'd be connected to homeowners that way. And we're trying to open up our library to other designers as well, again, with liability waivers and a sales platform. So that's all I'll say about that, but call me if you have more questions.
Yes, thank you. Right, we're all partners here in trying to help, right, promote more housing, the much needed housing that we need in our city. So for sure. Okay. Yeah, so now we'll get into so just right. So thinking about what the model plan review, a little bit more about that, right? So again, if you were one of our selected designers, one of your designs, one of the 10 designs, those review fees are going to be covered from the submission from the Casita model plan competition. But really everybody is welcome to submit and be part of our library. And so as Juan stated earlier, right, the review fees are based on valuation and square footage. So a rough range, right, is like 400 to 800, depending on the size of the casita. Those people, designers and design firms that have plans that have been approved in other jurisdictions, if we have an intergovernmental agreement with that jurisdiction, then they can be accepted as approved by the building officials and assessed at an administrative fee of $300. So for those of you who have plans that may already be approved in another jurisdiction that that has an intergovernmental agreement with us and abides by building codes like ours. And then maintaining a model plan status. So model plans are valid for 1 year, and they may be renewed until the applicable codes are updated. So after a new building code is adopted, model plans may not be renewed, but they will remain valid until their established expiration date. And then our requirements for our Casita model plan library. So as we said, right, so what we'll need for the website is that we'll want the name of the firm or the designer with all the contact information. Again, because we're just helping to connect the homeowners to you. And then we'll want the name of the Casita design, the cost to license the design, the size and square footage, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms. We'll have both a short description, right? So thinking like 300 characters or 50 words, and then a longer description to just kind of meet the different needs of the website. And then up to 8 images, but please note which image you want to be the cover image as the one that people will first interact with when they see. And then we'll get the model plan permit number for internal reference. So, right, so we won't post that information. That'll be for us to be able to check and verify the model plan when somebody does the site plan. So if you have further like building and plan support, right, we have Ken Van Carson and Jeremy Hamblin that are also on our call here today. You can reach out and contact them. And then for submitting to the Casita Model Plan Library, so that's Dan Bursick and myself, right, so once you have a model plan that's been approved, right, then you can reach out to us and we can make sure that we're getting all the correct information, and then we'll work to update and submit to our website. And so that is really what we've got. And we are happy to answer any of your questions. So Samuel, yes. I don't know if you have another question or if it's just left from before.
I think it's different before. I apologize.
That's okay. So we'll say on if you have any additional questions or anything, but really thank you, all of you, for your contributions to supporting additional housing in Tucson. We really appreciate all of the work that you put in and helping our community. And again, if you have questions about the library specifically, go back one more, right, to email or reach out to myself or Dan, and then our building team and our residential building team for help with any building requirements.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone for joining us today. As we had mentioned before, we're planning on taking all of this information, continuing to create more materials that kind of help you through the process and guide you through the process. And then we'll follow up and post this online and send that information out to everyone so they have access to it afterwards. We also have several follow-ups that we'll be reaching out to. I know Shay, Alex, Peter, among some others that will be reaching out to you as well to have some of those follow-up conversations. So again, really appreciate it and appreciate helping to provide additional housing options for people in Tucson.
Will the video be posted somewhere too of this recording?
Yeah, Alex, most definitely. We're planning on posting it on the website, the Casitas in Tucson website, but we'll also, as a follow-up to those who attended, we'll send them out all the information from the meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Of course.
If you don't have any additional questions or anything, thank you all so much for coming, and we look forward to continuing to build out this library with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you guys. This was amazing. It was awesome.
Thank you for all of your support as well.
Yeah, thanks all.